G'day, it's Greg Newson, Naturopath, Herbalist and Nutritionist from the Vitality and Wellness Centre, and welcome to our latest podcast on the role of the colon or the large intestine, in which we're going to discuss the functions of the colon, and surprisingly, it's not all about pooping. We'll also look at what health conditions are associated with poor colon function, common signs and symptoms that can indicate that our large intestine is operating below par, and of course, we're going to focus on what abundant gifts Mother Nature has to offer to help us heal, regenerate, and revitalise our colon back to optimal health. Today's podcast is brought to you by Naturovital, supplements with absolute purity, with no added chemicals or excipients to bind tablet ingredients together, make manufacturing cheaper, fill empty spaces in capsules, or increase the volumes in powders. All herbal blends are alcohol-free, and all supplements contain no synthetic or semi-synthetic flavourings, colourings or sweeteners, just pure active ingredients. So you can feel confident and comfortable in knowing that your supplements are as close to nature as possible. Check them out today. So the colon, what is it and what does it do? Well, after the stomach, the pancreas, the liver, the gallbladder and the small intestines do their job of breaking the food down and absorbing the nutrients, the leftover stuff heads for the colon. Now the colon's primary role here is to absorb the water that remains in that food matter. This process is crucial because it's one of the body's important ways to regulate our fluid balance, to keep us hydrated. So if the colon is unable to absorb enough water, you'll end up with diarrhea, which is obviously a little inconvenient, but on the flip side, if the colon absorbs too much water, you'll get constipated. Now, the main reason why the colon absorbs too much water is that we don't drink enough water and our body is dehydrated. So the colon does the best it can do to help keep us alive and hydrated, and that is to absorb as much fluid as it can. So if you're constipated, the first thing I tell patients when they come to the clinic is, how much water do you drink? If it's less than 2 litres, I say go home and drink 2 litres of water for the next 3 days and then get back to me. And it's amazing how many times people ring me and say, oh my goodness, I can go to the toilet. I've been to the toilet. It's because you're rehydrating the body and the colon is not absorbing excess water. It's just the colon should just, I'll get that word out in a minute, absorb enough so that the feces is still moist and it's able to slide on through the intestinal tract. In addition, the colon also reabsorbs important electrolytes like sodium and chloride. Now, they help maintain proper nerve and muscle function. If they didn't, for example, a very important muscle that's innervated by a lot of nerves wouldn't work properly, and that is the heart. And if the heart doesn't have the right amount of electrolytes, it can then result in an irregular heartbeat. The colon also houses a massive amount of bacteria, and I mean massive. We're talking about trillions of bacteria here. Now, these bacteria make up a complex and dynamic ecosystem known as our gut microbiome or our gut microbiotica. And the cumulative weight of this bacteria is around 2 kilograms, which is a fair weight. Now, this mightn't be the most ideal conversation talking about bacteria, but these bacteria are actually essential for our health. They're so important, in fact, that if they get sick, you get sick. If they die, you die. That's how important they are. One of the crucial roles these bacteria play is producing vitamins. Now, most people think vitamins come from food, and they do. The vitamins that these bacteria make are primarily the B vitamins, and they are thiamine, which is vitamin B1. Now, that is essential for energy metabolism, nerve function, and the synthesis of brain chemicals or neurotransmitters. They also make riboflavin, which is vitamin B2, which is important for energy production, cellular function, growth, and development. They also make niacin. We're going through all the B's here, which is vitamin B3, which is essential for DNA repair, metabolism, and the production of energy and fatty acids. Pantothenic acid, which is vitamin B5, which is crucial for the synthesis of a substance called coenzyme A, which is an important fatty acid that is involved in the synthesis or the creation of our hormones. Pyridoxine, which is vitamin B6, is important for amino acid metabolism, neurotransmitter synthesis, and hemoglobin production. Biotin, which is known as vitamin B7, is essential for fatty acid synthesis, amino acid metabolism, and the health of our skin, our hair, and our nails. These bacteria aren't done yet. They also produce folate, which is vitamin B9, which is crucial for DNA synthesis and repair, cell division and growth. Now, they produce all of those B vitamins. Now, they also produce vitamin B12, but in this case, the B12 isn't absorbed because B12 is absorbed through the ileum, which is the lower part or the third part of the small intestine. So these are manufactured in the colon. Unfortunately, I don't know what the role of the B12 is, but they're not going to produce it for no reason at all. So, yeah, I'm unsure on that one. They also produce vitamin K2. They convert vitamin K1, which is found in your green leafy vegetables, to vitamin K2, which is essential for blood clotting, bone health, and the prevention of calcification of arteries, which is atherosclerosis, and calcium buildup in soft tissue. They also produce choline and inositol, but in small amounts. So these bacteria are pretty important. They're like a multivitamin production factory just within our gut. Besides producing vitamins, these beneficial bacteria also help to keep the harmful organisms in check by competing for space within the intestines and nutrients, and they also produce substances that inhibit the pathogenic bacteria and the pathogenic organisms from living around in that gut area, and they also stimulate the immune system to respond to those bacteria and produce immune cells that will destroy them. So you're starting to understand the importance of the colon and the bacteria that it houses, but their roles aren't finished just yet. The bacteria are also involved in fermentation within the colon, and this is a process where indigestible carbohydrates called prebiotic fibres or resistant starches that we can't break down through our own digestive juices and processes are broken down by these bacteria. Basically what happens is that our beneficial bacteria eat these fibres and starches and they poop out certain chemicals called short-chain fatty acids such as butyrate, propionate and acetate. Now, these short-chain fatty acids are incredibly important for several reasons. Firstly, they're the main food source for all the cells lining the colon. Then those cells are called colonocytes. Now, these colonocytes get 80% of the food from these short-chain fatty acids, in particular butyrate. Now, butyrate helps maintain the integrity and function of the gut barrier. A healthy gut barrier is essential for preventing harmful substances to move from the colon into the bloodstream, a condition called leaky gut syndrome or intestinal permeability. Now, leaky gut syndrome can lead to a lot of inflammation and multiple health conditions or health problems, such as fatigue, mood swings, mental health problems, poor memory, poor concentration, poor focus, and even headaches. Another really important outcome of the fermentation process is that these short-chain fatty acids have really strong, potent anti-inflammatory properties. For example, butyrate has been shown to inhibit inflammation within the colon by regulating immune cell function and suppressing the pro-inflammatory molecules within the colon, whereas acetate and propionate influence the immune system to reduce the amount of pro-inflammatory mediators, thus reducing the risk of chronic inflammation. Now, most diseases are of a chronic inflammatory nature, whether it be cardiovascular disease, dementia, Alzheimer's, cancer, diabetes. They're all inflammatory. Obesity, inflammatory, and all chronic inflammation. So these short-chain fatty acids help to reduce that inflammation. Furthermore, the beneficial effects of these short-chain fatty acids can reach throughout the whole body. They can enter the bloodstream and influence metabolism, insulin sensitivity, even brain function. For example, butyrate has been found to have neuroprotective properties, which means it protects the brain tissue and the nerves within the brain, thus enhancing its ability to protect against neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and dementia. Acetate also helps to regulate appetite, whereas propionate helps to lower blood lipid levels by increasing cholesterol synthesis within the liver. So how cool is that? These bacteria that just live within our gut doing all that they can to keep us healthy. And all they need is fibre. And where do they get it? Fruits, vegetables and herbs and whole grains. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, the colon is divided into several parts: the cecum, the ascending colon, the transverse colon, the descending colon, the sigmoid colon, and the rectum. Now, each of these sections has its own role in processing and moving waste throughout the length of the colon. So the cecum, it's at the very beginning of the large intestines, and it's located in the lower right part of your abdomen. Now, the cecum, it's a pouch-like structure that receives the chyme, which is all the liquid from the small intestines, from the ileum, the last part of the small intestine, and when it gets into the cecum, that chyme gets into the cecum, it starts the process of absorbing fluids and salts from the digestive waste. From there, the colon moves to the ascending colon, which is the section that travels up the right-hand side of your abdomen to your rib cage, and this is where the process of extracting the water and salts from the waste begins in earnest. Now, the ascending colon also absorbs some nutrients, and it continues to compact the feces into a more solid form. If we go across the top part of the abdomen from rib cage to rib cage, that's where the transverse colon runs. And here there's more water and electrolytes that are absorbed. It's also the key area for the bacterial fermentation of all those remaining carbohydrates that we just spoke about. Now, from the transverse colon, we move down the left-hand side, which is the descending colon. Now, there is still some water and electrolyte absorption happening there, but the main function of the descending colon is to store the waste until we're ready to move it to the next section, which the next section is the sigmoid colon, which is like an S-shaped curve within that colon, and that serves as a crucial storage area for the fecal matter and holding the waste until we're ready to have a bowel motion. And additionally, the sigmoid colon also compresses the waste into a form that is more easily expelled. The last part of the colon is the rectum. It's the last stop, so to speak. And its role is to store the feces until we're ready to go to the bathroom. And it does this, like if you can imagine, it's a rectum's little sack, so to speak, and the more feces that come into the rectum, the more it stretches. Within the rectum, there are stretch receptors. Now, when these receptors stretch to a certain distance or a certain length, they send a message to the brain and they say, time to go. Off we go. Gotta go now. And you go to the toilet. So they're the roles of the colon. But if we actually look at naturopathic medicine and TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, the colon has a few additional roles. So naturopathic medicine sees the colon as the major elimination organ within the body, which kind of makes sense because that poo is quite toxic and we need to get rid of it. And naturopathic medicine believes that a healthy colon supports a robust immune system, which is understandable because 70% of our immune system lives in the intestinal tract. Now, Chinese medicine also believe that the function of the large intestines is to contribute to a smooth flow of qi, which is our vital energy, and blood throughout the body. Now, blockages or imbalances in the large intestines can affect the overall health and vitality of the body, which is understandable. Constipation, you don't poop, you don't get rid of toxins, that builds up in the body. They also go one step further and look at the emotional health. So they link the large intestines to the ability to release and let go, not only of our physical stuff like our poo, but also our emotional issues. So issues with the colon may also associate with feelings of being stuck, holding on to old grudges, or unable to let go of the past. So now we realise that the colon is more than just a chamber to poop out of. It actually has quite a lot of vital roles. But there are some common signs and symptoms and health conditions that can indicate that the colon isn't working to its optimal function. And that can be bloating, which is caused by a lot of the harmful organisms within the gut producing gases, which then obviously cause the belly to expand or the colon to expand. That can then result in pain. Pain is also one of those other signs and symptoms. So if the colon is tender and sore, that can indicate inflammation. Inflammation causes pain. There can also be flatulence, and that can be because of that fermentation process, and that can be quite rancid, or it could just be not rancid at all, but just a lot of gas. The stools can be loose, diarrhea, constipated. If it's not like a ripe, firm banana, that's basically how I describe it. If it's not like a ripe, firm banana, there are issues in forming the stools, and that's generally because of dysbiosis, overgrowth of baddies, or poor colon function. For other people, their stools might be the other way around, and that's constipated, meaning they don't go to the toilet every day. It can be dry and hard to pass, and that can be because of our dehydrated state, but it can also be caused because of, get those words out, because of the inflammation within the intestinal wall or dysbiosis, that overgrowth of harmful organisms. So a lot of times people have those symptoms and they go to the doctors and the doctor goes, well, I don't know what's wrong. We will label it irritable bowel syndrome. Yeah, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, is a sign of poor colon function, as is inflammatory bowel disease, which is an umbrella term for chronic inflammatory conditions of the gastrointestinal tract. And those diseases can be Crohn's disease. Now, Crohn's disease can affect any part of the intestinal tract, but mainly affects the ileum, which is a small part of the intestines, and the cecum, or the ascending colon, which is the beginning part of the large intestine. Another type of inflammatory bowel disease is colitis, and that is a general term that refers to inflammation of the colon. So any disease that ends in itis is indicative of inflammation. So arthritis, inflammation of the joints; sinusitis, inflammation of the sinus, and so on and so on. Now, there can be several different types of colitis, and they can all be caused by different things. So there's infectious colitis, so obviously that's caused by a very bad case of dysbiosis, harmful organisms in the gut that infect the colon that leads to inflammation. There is ischemic colitis, which there is reduced blood flow to the colon, which then causes the inflammation. There's allergenic colitis that's caused by allergies. There's ulcerative colitis that is caused by the immune system attacking the lining of the colon. That's an autoimmune disease. Other conditions that can affect the colon are the diverticulitis and diverticulosis. So diverticulosis, it occurs when there is small bulging pockets that develop in the colon wall, so they bulge outwards. The diverticulitis occurs when these pockets become inflamed or infected, and that leads to symptoms such as severe abdominal pain, fever, nauseous, and obviously change in bowel habits. Now, anyone that's had a colonoscopy has most probably had some polyps removed, so colonic polyps. Now, they're growth on the inner lining of the colon, and they can be benign, non-cancerous, but they can also have the potential to becoming malignant, so they become cancerous. Now, the polyps themselves generally don't cause any symptoms, but sometimes they can lead to bleeding and changes in bowel habits. Now, polyps can lead to a thing called colon cancer. Now, colon cancer is the third most common cancer in the world after breast cancer and lung cancer, and it begins with these benign polyps. Now, there is some very important nutrients that we should be consuming every day that dramatically reduce the risk of colon cancer. I'm not going to tell you right now. You'll have to wait to the end, which means you've got to listen. Another health condition that's associated with the colon are hemorrhoids. Now, these are swollen veins in the lower rectum and the anus, and they can be internal or external, and a lot of times they can bleed because of the straining during bowel motion or chronic constipation or even prolonged sitting. But what we actually find, and they're the classical medical reasons as why someone can suffer from hemorrhoids. In naturopathic medicine, we go a little step further, because if the veins become swollen, that means now all veins feed blood back to the liver. Now, if the liver is congested, that blood pools, and it pools in the legs, so varicose veins, and in the hemorrhoids, so in the lower parts of the body. So a lot of times people with hemorrhoids also have liver congestion. So improved liver function, you dramatically reduce the incidence of hemorrhoids. Now, those people can also suffer from high blood pressure because the blood is not getting to the liver, which then the liver cleanses and then pushes on through back to the heart, and everything keeps on going around. So I digress there, a little side issue. Now, what are the common causes of poor colon function? Now, there's a variety of factors, and they range from lifestyle choices and dietary habits to environmental exposure. So the number one cause of poor colon function is low fibre. The number one cause of colon cancer, or the number one preventative, I should say, of colon cancer is fibre. Now, we apparently in our Western diet have 15 to 20 grams of fibre a day, but a lot of the nomadic tribes of Africa that aren't westernised with their food, they have up to 90 grams of fibre a day. They don't have colon cancer. We do. So, yeah, okay, so let's get back into fibre. So Fibre is crucial for maintaining bowel regularity and preventing constipation. So obviously you want to get that waste out as quickly as possible. Now there's 3 types of fibre. There's soluble fibre, insoluble fibre and prebiotic fibre. Now the soluble fibre dissolves in water and forms like a gel-like substance which helps soften the stool, and it takes away a lot of toxins and chemicals and estrogens and cholesterols into the stool as well. Now, the soluble fibre helps the stool pass easier, where the insoluble fibre adds bulk to the stool, and that bulk stimulates the muscles of the intestines and promotes regular bowel motions. Whereas the prebiotic fibres feed the cells of the colon and the beneficial bacteria that we spoke about earlier, the fermentation process, so they help improve immune function and lower intestinal inflammation. A low-fibre diet can increase the risk of constipation. The stools become harder to pass, which can lead to hemorrhoids and anal fissures. They can also increase the risk of developing diverticulitis, because if you're not pooping daily, that feces just sits in the sigmoid colon and the rectum, and it keeps on stretching, and that can break the bonds that hold the cells together, and then allows those pockets to form. And obviously, low-fibre, cancer. So going from low to high, consuming a diet high in unhealthy fats, particularly the trans-saturated fats that you get in your vegetable oils, your vegetable shortenings, your margarines, can slow down digestion. They can lead to constipation, but these fats can interfere with the gut's ability to contract and move food efficiently through the digestive tract, i.e. hence constipation. Additionally, the high-fat diet often lacks fibre, so that also then upsets the whole digestive process as well. Processed foods. Regular consumption of processed foods, which are typically low in fibre and high in sugars and unhealthy fats and salts and additives and preservatives and flavourings, can disrupt the gut bacteria. And it leads to a condition known as dysbiosis, which is the increase of baddies and the downregulation of the goodies within the gut. This can lead to irritable bowel syndrome, inflammation of the gut, a weakened gut immune system. When you weaken the gut immune system and you cause inflammation, you can lead to leaky gut syndrome. Plus, you're also not getting a whole heap of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and phytonutrients that are found in natural foods. We've already mentioned dehydration, but I'm going to touch on it again. Not drinking enough water causes the stools to become hard and dry and difficult to pass, which can then exacerbate hemorrhoids or cause an anal fissure. Chronic dehydration can also lead to conditions like diverticulosis, which are those pockets in the colon wall, making it harder to get rid of the waste, which then, if that gets trapped in those pockets, that then becomes inflamed and infected, and that causes a lot of pain. Dehydration can also disrupt the electrolyte balance, and the colon's role is to absorb those electrolytes, and then that compromises our overall health, not only our digestive health. Sitting on your bum all day, a sedentary lifestyle can also slow down digestion, cause toxicity within the gut, and lead to constipation. Physical exercise or physical activity helps stimulate the natural contractions of the intestinal muscles, so that when we move, it promotes the movement of the stool through the colon. And when we don't get enough exercise and sit on our tush, that leads to sluggish digestion and an infrequent or difficult bowel motions. Now that can then over time lead to chronic constipation, again the hemorrhoids, the diverticulitis, all that sort of stuff. Now, hands up who's been stressed and noticed that they get bloated or they get stomach pain or something along those lines. Well, the reason why is that stress affects the body's nervous system and can alter the gut motility, the ability of nerves to stimulate muscle contractions in the colon, and lead to sensitivity. That can lead to digestive disorders such as irritable bowel syndrome. And chronic stress can increase the production of stress hormones like cortisol, which can negatively impact the digestive tract by increasing the inflammation within the gut, altering our gut microbiome, so allowing a lot more good guys to die and a lot more bad guys to grow. And then that chronic stress decreases the stomach's ability to produce the gastric juices and the pancreas's ability to produce the digestive enzymes, which can result in abdominal pain, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, all of those things. And not finished yet, chronic stress can also weaken the immune system, and then that exacerbates digestive conditions, causing any of the inflammatory bowel diseases that I've mentioned, or colitis that we've mentioned previously. Now if you're busy and you get the urge to go to the toilet and you're at work or you're at the shopping centre and you're a bit embarrassed to go to the toilet, that resisting that urge can lead to longer stool retention, which causes obviously the stool to become harder and more difficult to pass as the colon continues to absorb water from it. This ignoring your body's ability to say, hey, we need to go to the toilet, you start to condition your brain to go, oh, well, we need to go, but we're not going to send much of a stimulus because no one listens to us anyway. We're just talking to ourselves. And you then don't go to the toilet for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days. You're in hospital and then they've got to manually remove it. It's not a good thing. Then you're relying on laxatives and you're not strengthening your colon, or you're not allowing your bodies to naturally do what it needs to do. Now, besides obviously causing chronic constipation, hemorrhoids, anal fissures and bloating and gas and all that sort of stuff, it can also cause diverticulitis, but being chronically constipated will dramatically increase the inflammation within the gut, because all of your good, healthy gut bacteria, they don't like living in poo, and, the bad guys do. Oh, it's a cesspool down here. We're going to create a great toxic environment. Well, that increases inflammation. Now, if you increase inflammation, besides colon cancer, which is a dead set side effect of this, you'll also increase colitis or inflammatory bowel conditions. Now, if you have any of those conditions and you leave them long enough, guess what happens? You go to the doctors, you go to the hospital, it's so inflamed they can't do anything with it and they cut it out. And they stitch a small intestine down to your anus and you've got no colon. If you've got no colon, you've got no microbiome. Well, you've got very minimal microbiome within the gut. There might be a little bit in the small intestine, but the bulk of it's gone. Mate, you've got a shortened life. And you're walking around with a colostomy bag for a long, long time, which is basically a bag that hangs off you with this foul liquid poo that no one can do anything with. And you're on all these things to try to keep you healthy and try to keep you alive. God damn it. Sorry, I'm rambling here. I apologise. Anyway, we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Now I've got off my high horse, there's a few other things that can cause poor bowel habits, and they're hormonal changes, and they're generally women, I'm sorry girls, and they particularly affect bowel habits. For example, the hormonal changes during the menstrual cycle or pregnancy or even in menopause can lead to symptoms of constipation or diarrhea. Now, progesterone, which is a common, from the second part of a woman's cycle, from when they ovulate to when they menstruate, there's a dramatic increase in progesterone to get the uterus and everything ready for a fertile egg. And when you're pregnant, you dramatically increase your progesterone levels to keep the baby nice and healthy and keep the pregnancy nice and healthy. Well, progesterone can slow the movement down in the digestive tract of the stool, so that can then lead to constipation, hence what we've just been saying. But then there's other hormonal changes that can increase the gut's ability to move things through, and then you end up with diarrhea. So, girls, if you suffer from that, best go see a naturopath or a herbalist or a Chinese medicine practitioner, someone that can help balance your hormones. So, exposure to toxins. Now, long-term exposure to environmental toxins such as pesticides, chemicals or pollutants can harm the digestive system and disrupt the balance of the good gut bacteria. As I've previously mentioned, this can lead to inflammation, which then obviously constipation or diarrhea or any of the inflammatory disorders, including colon cancer. If you've ever eaten some food and then a couple of hours later or 6, 7 hours later, you've got a lot of abdominal pain and you've got to go to the toilet and it goes straight out of you. That's generally caused by a bacterial infection in the food. Now, that can be a salmonella infection, it can be an E. coli infection. And the colon causes the diarrhea because it doesn't want that hanging around, and it gives you diarrhea so you can just squirt that stuff out and get rid of it. But constant low-grade infections, whether they be bacterial, viral, worms, parasites, fungi, they can all cause inflammation of the colon. That's dysbiosis. That's the broad term for dysbiosis. And that can damage the colon, and that can lead to things like your colitis, your inflammatory disorders, your abdominal pain. It can weaken the walls of the digestive system, and they will lead to leaky gut syndrome, which then allows a whole heap of toxins and rubbish to pass into the bloodstream, which then when it goes straight to the liver and the liver goes, I don't want you, and it puts it back into the intestinal tract and it comes back to the liver and the liver goes, what am I going to do? You keep on coming back, and it will put it into fat tissue. And because when a toxin's in fat tissue, it's rendered harmless for a while, but guess where the fattiest organ is in the body? It sits between your ears. So we don't really want too much fat up, well, not fat, we don't really want too much toxins up there. Now, there are some common pharmaceutical medications that can damage the colon wall. And some of the most common ones are the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs such as aspirin, ibuprofen, or naproxen. Those drugs inhibit an enzyme called cyclooxygenase. Now there's cyclooxygenase 1 and cyclooxygenase 2. Number 2 in excess is inflammatory. So those drugs are reducing that, but they also reduce cyclooxygenase 1. Now, cyclooxygenase 1 is extremely important to the digestive tract because it produces protective chemicals that maintain the mucosal lining of the whole gastrointestinal tract. So long-term use of these drugs lowers that, and that then causes the intestines to become ulcerated, and a leaky gut syndrome will most definitely occur. Antibiotics are another form of medication that damage the intestinal wall, and they also disrupt the natural balance of the gut bacteria. So an antibiotic's job is to kill bacteria. Well, you've got 2 kilo of it sitting in your gut, and it's not going to discriminate on whether that's good or bad. So if it's killing the good guys, it's allowing the bad guys to grow, and whether they're parasites or viruses or worms or whatever, and then that creates inflammation with the intestinal wall. And a lot of times people get antibiotic-associated diarrhea. I'll tell you how to get rid of that one later, or prevent that one later. Chemotherapeutic drugs target rapidly dividing cells. Now, they include the cells that live in the intestinal tract. The cells in the intestinal tract are only around for 2 to 4 days, and then they reproduce and form other cells. So they've got a high turnover. Now, a lot of people that have had chemotherapeutic medication will lose their hair. If you lose your hair, you've also got the class of drugs that dramatically damages your intestinal wall, leading to the ulceration, leaky gut syndrome, bleeding, etc. Now, there's a class of drugs called bisphosphonates, and they're used to treat osteoporosis. A common one is Fosamax. Now, I can't understand how these drugs are even allowed, because what they can do is that they can literally erode the mucosal lining if not taken properly. Now, you've got to take them with lots of water and remain upright for at least 30 minutes, because if not, they can adhere to the esophagus, so they erode the esophagus. This is one of the side effects. You have a hole in your esophagus. Not a good thing. And they erode the gastric lining, and that leads to, obviously, inflammation, but it also can lead to ulceration. So if you've got osteoporosis, trust me, there is a lot more natural ways to rebalance your bone mineral density. I might do a podcast on that one day. Any kid that's had acne and they've gone to the doctors, good chance they've been put on Accutane or Roaccutane, and that pharmaceutical medication can disrupt the gut bacteria and also create inflammatory bowel disease. Not for everyone, but some people it might not take effect for quite a few years because it can upset the immune system as well, and then that allows the immune system over a period of time to turn on itself and start attacking the colon wall, and that's ulcerative colitis. Now, I've spoken a lot about the colon and the symptoms and the signs and the health conditions that are associated with poor colon function, but we've missed one very important thing, and that is the poo. The colour or the texture of the poo can actually tell us quite a lot about our health. So I'm just going to go into that a little bit. If the stool's brown, that's the ideal colour, and that means it's normal. If it's green, it can indicate that either you're eating a lot of green leafy vegetables or that the food is passing through the intestinal tract too quickly, which means generally not enough stomach acid or digestive enzymes. It can be yellow, greasy and foul smelling, and that indicates excessive fat. Now, that could be due to malabsorption, a condition like celiac disease, or you're not producing enough bile through the liver or the gallbladder to break the fat down properly. If the stool's black, it can be caused by iron supplements, lots of the licorice confectionery, or it can indicate that there is bleeding in the upper gastrointestinal tract, which is basically head off to the doctors and get that checked out. If it's red, it can indicate that you're eating a lot of red foods like beetroots, or it can indicate significant bleeding in the lower intestinal tract, such as hemorrhoids or bleeding from the diverticular disease. If the stool is pale or a clay colour or a light colour, then it can indicate that there's a bile duct obstruction or problems with the liver or other conditions that prevent the bile from being excreted or produced. If it's orange, it's foods high in beta-carotene like carrots, or from medications that contain aluminium hydroxide, but it can also indicate issues with bile or liver as well. So if your stool is separate hard lumps like nuts and difficult to pass, that can indicate constipation. If it's a sausage shape but quite lumpy, that's also a typical sign of constipation. If it's a sausage-like but with a few cracks on the surface, that's normal. If it's a sausage that's smooth and soft, that's normal. If it's soft blobs with clear-cut edges that it's easy to pass, lack of fibre. Interesting one. If it's fluffy with pieces of ragged edges or it's a mushy stool, that's mild diarrhea. If it's watery with no solid pieces and it's very, very liquid, you guessed it, it's diarrhea. And in that case, you have to be extremely careful because you can suffer from dehydration and electrolyte deficiency. So that may require a trip to the doctors. Okay, it's now time to look at what Mother Nature has to offer that are going to help improve the function of the intestinal tract or the colon. So, first cab off the rank, you've heard me talk a lot about inflammation, so anti-inflammatory herbs. Now, anti-inflammatory herbs contain compounds that help reduce inflammation in the colon. So that's going to be obviously beneficial for anyone with inflammatory bowel disease or colitis or Crohn's disease, whatever it is. And good herbs that fall into that category are turmeric, ginger, and white willow bark. Another important class of herbs are the antispasmodic herbs. Now, antispasmodic herbs help to relax the smooth muscles of the gastrointestinal tract, thus reducing spasms and pain. Now, these type of herbs help a lot with people suffering from IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, in which they have a lot of cramping, pain and bloating. So good examples of these herbs are peppermint, chamomile and ginger. So ginger is also an anti-inflammatory and an antispasmodic. Another important class of herbs are carminative herbs, and carminative herbs help to expel gas from the digestive tract, thus reducing bloating, and they work by relaxing the muscles of the intestines and increasing peristalsis, so the movement of the stools through the intestines. This is useful for reducing or relieving bloating, gas, and a lot of that digestive discomfort. So herbs there that are very important are fennel, aniseed, and ginger. Another class of herbs that is extremely beneficial for the gut are demucilin herbs. Now, demucilin herbs contain a lot of mucilage, a lot of slimy stuff, which helps soothe and protects the mucous membranes in the digestive tract. And so it basically puts a protective coating over the intestines. Now, that can help reduce irritation and inflammation, so very important for conditions like inflammatory bowel disease, colitis, and irritable bowel syndrome. Great demucilin herbs are slippery elm bark, licorice root. Now, we're not talking the black stuff here, we're talking the herb, and marshmallow root. And now we're not talking about the white or the pink ones, we're talking about marshmallow. So when we've got an overgrowth of harmful organisms within the gut, the antimicrobial herbs step up to the fore, and they help to reduce and eliminate the overload of those harmful gut organisms, which helps rebalance the good guys, which in turn helps improve symptoms like gas, abdominal pain, bloating, constipation, and intestinal inflammation. Great examples of those herbs are wormwood, black walnut, neem leaf, and I'm going to throw ginger in there as well. Prebiotic herbs that include chicory root, dandelion root and garlic, they actually provide inulin. Well, chicory and dandelion provide inulin, which is a prebiotic fibre that helps feed the beneficial gut bacteria, where garlic contains compounds that promote the growth of the healthy gut flora. When we introduce prebiotic fibres into our diet, that dramatically increases the health of our gut microbiome because that's the only food they eat. They provide major nourishment for the cells that line the intestinal tract, thus promoting a healthier colon and a healthier immune function. Now, sometimes people have done a lot of work on their digestive tract. They've looked at what the foods they eat. They've taken antimicrobial herbs. They've taken probiotics. They've taken slippery elm and that sort of stuff. And their stools are still loose. Well, there's a class of herbs that will help with that, and they are the astringent herbs. So astringent herbs tighten and tone tissues, especially in the digestive tract. So if you've got tissues that are weeping in the digestive tract, in Chinese medicine that's called damp. And by tightening those tissues, you greatly reduce the inflammation within those cells or those tissues, and thus then reducing the secretions. Now, this can help a lot of people that suffer from diarrhea, and it'll help to firm up the stool's consistency. So herbs that do that are witch hazel, raspberry leaf, and blackberry leaf. I've mentioned this class of herbs before in previous podcasts, and they are the bitter herbs. Now, bitter herbs stimulate the stomach to produce the gastric juices and the pancreas to produce the digestive enzymes, which all bodes well for better nutrient absorption from our food. Classic examples of those herbs are dandelion root and gentian. There are another class of herbs that are highly beneficial for the colon, and they are the laxatives. There's the bulk-forming laxatives, and they're laxatives that absorb water in the intestines, and they form that gel-like substance, and they add bulk to the stools. This increases peristalsis and allows the feces to move on down the intestinal tract quite well. And those herbs are things like psyllium husks, pectin, rice bran, and marshmallow root. Then there is stimulating laxatives. Now, these herbs stimulate the lining of the intestines, which speeds up the bowel motions, increasing muscle contractions through the intestines, which means you go to the toilet. A classic example of this is Cascara sangregar, turkey rhubarb, and senna. I don't really use senna. I'll always use cascara and turkey rhubarb because not only are these herbs stimulating, but they also improve the tone of the intestinal tract. What that means is that over a period of time of taking cascara, your muscles get stronger and the tone of the muscles gets stronger, and they're able to then perform the task by themselves. So if someone's suffering from constipation, I will always give them a product called Natrovital on the Move, which contains cascara and the turkey rhubarb and some other herbs as well. I might give them 5 ml 2 or 3 times a day to get things moving, but the more they take it, the less they need, until they're needing 1 ml or half a ml and then nothing, because then the bowels are able to work by themselves. The last class of herbs that Mother Nature has got in her little medicine bag are emollient laxatives. Now, these type of herbs coat and soften the stool by mixing it with water, making it easy to pass, so they're quite useful for people that suffer from hemorrhoids or anal fissures, or where the stool is difficult and dry and hard to pass. So these herbs are also the demucilin herbs, which are the marshmallow and slippery elm bark. Other notable ingredients or nutrients that help colon health are probiotics, which are live beneficial bacteria that help support the gut microbiome. They enhance digestion and boost the immune system, which helps them prevent diseases such as irritable bowel syndrome or inflammatory bowel disease. So you can get those in capsules, but you can also get those in yogurt and kefir and sauerkraut and kimchi and miso and kombucha. There's quite a few different sources of fermented foods and foods that contain the beneficial gut bacteria. Vitamin D is very important for colon function. Not only does it support immune function, but it also helps to protect against colon cancer. Whereas zinc is very important for immune function and has antioxidant properties, it is essential for cell growth and division, which is crucial for the repair and regeneration of the intestinal tissue. Magnesium is also important for colon health, as it is essential for the contraction and the relaxation of the muscles that line the intestinal tract, which means it helps us go to the toilet better. It can also have a mild laxative effect, and it does have anti-inflammatory properties. Antioxidants, so anything that's purple, green, red, orange, blue, brown, yellow. I can't remember all the colours now. Any food like those, and I'm not talking about Smarties or M&Ms. I'm talking about real food, fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, etc. That contain antioxidants are very important for the colon because they help protect the colon from damage and inflammation. As we've previously mentioned, water is essential for proper bowel function. Water helps keep the stool moist and allows it to flow unimpeded through the colon. Just a word on water. A lot of people will drink the chlorinated tap water, and when you think about it, if you've got a pool and you put chlorine in your pool, what do you put chlorine in your pool for? To kill bacteria. Okay, well, you're drinking tap water that's chlorinated, and it generally has a lot less chlorine than your pool. But nevertheless, you have that all day, every day. You are damaging the gut microbiome. So if you can, please try to drink as much pure and filtered water as you possibly can. Now, I think that's it's not, sorry, I digress here. I've forgotten a very, very, very important amino acid that is essential for colon function, and that is the amino acid glutamine. The reason it's so important is that it serves as the primary fuel source for the enterocytes. Now, they're the cells that line the intestines, so these cells require a significant amount of energy to maintain their integrity of the gut lining, and if they break down, leaky gut syndrome, and then that affects the absorption of the nutrients and allows a lot of toxins to go into the bloodstream. Well, glutamine provides that energy. It's their fuel source. Not only does it feed them, but it also plays a critical role in the maintenance of the tight gap junctions between the cells. What that basically means, think of a brick wall. You've got all these individual bricks and you've got the mortar or the cement that goes around each brick. They're the tight gap junctions. The bricks are the cells of the colon. If that mortar or the cement breaks down, that allows, flies and wasps and bees and cockroaches and spiders and crickets and whatever else to pass into the wall cavity. Same thing happens in your body. Well, not the spiders and the ants and the flies and all that sort of stuff, but all the toxins and the poisons go from the gut into the intestinal tract. So glutamine, very important to keep that strong. It also has anti-inflammatory properties and is one of the 3 amino acids needed to make the body's major antioxidant enzyme, glutathione. But it's not finished there. It's also crucial for the optimal functioning of the immune cells within the gut, associated lymphoid tissue with the acronyms of GALT. Always love how we come up with acronyms for words, but anyway, this glutamine, it actually supports the proliferation and the activity of our lymphocytes and our monocytes. So our lymphocytes, they're our army. When you get an infection, it's your lymphocytes that go to battle. The macrophages, they are the detectives. They go out and hunt the baddies and bring them back to jail, or the lymphatic system where they're dissected and a weakness is found, and then the body manufactures the army, the lymphocytes, that are engineered to attack that virus or bacteria or whatever it is. Generally, it's a virus for a lymphocyte. Neutrophils is more bacteria, but I digress. Before we talk about what I do in the clinic to help people improve their colon health, there are some very important things that you can do to help your colon health. And the first one is eat lots of fibre-rich foods, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, pulses, beans, herbs. All of those things contain abundant amounts of fibre and antioxidants and phytonutrients as well. Drink more water. Keep the fluid up. Allow the faeces to pass down or slide down easily through the colon. If you suffer from stress, look at ways of improving stress, whether that be exercise, yoga, tai chi, meditation, deep breathing, doing things that you love, getting out of a situation that is causing you stress. Trust me, it'll make a huge difference to digestive health. And if you're sitting on your bum, get up and move. Exercise, because as we mentioned, exercise stimulates peristalsis. It stimulates that ability of the colon muscles to move the feces through. Well, if we get rid of the poo that stores there, every single cell in that intestinal tract will be very happy. They'll be quite relieved. Like, who wants to sit next to poo all day, every day? So let's get it moving. Okay, so what do I do for patients that need help with their colon or their digestive system? My first port of call is to eliminate the harmful bacteria, parasites, worms, whatever, dysbiosis, and inoculate the good guys. So we're dramatically reducing the toxic load from those organisms, but we're also dramatically reducing the inflammation, and inflammation causes tissue degeneration and pain. So we're dramatically doing that, and then you can get improvement in things like flatulence, gas, bloating, abdominal pain, etc. So for that, I use Naturovital Intestinal Cleanse, which is a blend of antimicrobial herbs. With that, I use Naturovital Multibac 10, which is a broad spectrum probiotic. Along with that, I'll use Naturovital Sacrobiotic, which contains a special yeast that crowds out and suffocates the harmful bacteria or parasites, etc. On top of that, it enhances the production of those short-chain fatty acids, and it promotes the healing of the tight gap junction proteins, the things that break down and don't hold those bricks together. On top of that, it stimulates the production of secretory IgA. It's immunoglobulin. It's an antibody that plays a key role in the mucosal immunity, which then helps reduce the level of the pro-inflammatory cytokines, things that cause inflammation within the gut. And Saccharomyces boulardii, being a yeast probiotic, is not affected by antibiotics, so it's safe to give that when someone is on a course of antibiotics, and that prevents that antibiotic-associated diarrhea that I mentioned previously. So I would typically use those 3 products for 2 or 4 weeks, depending on the severity of the symptoms. Once that's done, we move into healing mode. So we've kind of taken away all the baddies and we've dramatically reduced a lot of the inflammation. Now we start to heal and regenerate and repair the gut lining. For that, I will keep Multibac 10, the probiotic, going. I will use Naturovital Intestinal Repair that contains a whole heap of nutrients with glutamine, zinc, vitamin D, fibres, and herbs that stimulate the repair and regeneration of the intestinal wall and downregulate the intestinal inflammation. On top of that, I will combine that with Naturovital Revitalize that contains a blend of prebiotic fibres and resistant starches that are consumed by the beneficial gut bacteria and are turned into short-chain fatty acids, which then feeds the whole microbiome and provides nourishment for the cells that line the colon, the colonocytes. With this, I generally also include Naturovital digestive support, so we're stimulating stomach acid production and the production of the pancreatic enzymes. Now, these are important because that allows the food to be broken down and effectively absorbed by the small intestines and to a lesser degree the colon, but also it allows the colon to be able to manufacture those vitamins, the B's and the K's that we mentioned previously, more efficiently. If someone is suffering from constipation, and that means that they're not going to the toilet at least once a day, because you've got a lot of food coming in through the day, you need to have that food going out. So if you're not going daily, you're constipated, I will always use Naturovital on the move. Now, the dosage of that varies depending on the constipation. Sometimes I'll give people 5 ml to 7.5 ml 2 to 3 times a day until the bowels start to work, and then we back it back. And as I mentioned, eventually we can come off that and the bowels are working quite effectively by themselves. To maintain good intestinal health, so you've spent the time and effort and you've cleaned out the bad guys and you've repaired the intestinal wall and that, you might have had to have repaired that for 4 to 6 weeks. That's a general time frame. I'll move people onto a maintenance program of which I will give them Naturovital Intestinal Maintain. Now, Intestinal Maintain contains 7 different types of fibres and beneficial herbs that just keep that gut healthy. There's a range of insoluble fibres that give bulk to the stools, soluble fibres that form that gel-like paste, and their prebiotic fibres, as well as herbs like slippery elm and marshmallow to help keep that gut nice and healthy and reduce the inflammation. Because really, you don't want to spend all this time and effort and change your diet and fix your gut up, and then 3, 6, 9, 12 months later, it all goes back to where it was because you didn't maintain the health of the gut, or your diet strayed, or you got an infection, or whatever it was. Anyway, this has been a long podcast and I apologise, and thank you for listening. There's a lot to discuss when we talk about the colon because of its diverse roles. If you'd like to hear more podcasts from us, please just subscribe and you'll be informed every time a new podcast comes out. Until next time, this is Greg. Live life and laugh loud.